You're too selfish to be my wife. Cal Rowan shouted across the bank lobby the moment I pulled my debit card away from his mother's hand. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, heads turned, and even the tellers looked up. My face burned with embarrassment, but what shocked me most wasn't the shouting. It was how quickly the man I loved turned against me over a simple word. No. Looking back now, that single moment saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. My name is Lena Brooks and I'm 31 years old. I work as an insurance claims analyst, a job that suits my careful nature. Years ago I trusted the wrong person. My ex slowly gained access to my finances, emptied my savings, and left me with damaged credit that took years to repair. Rebuilding wasn't easy. I worked overtime, followed a strict budget, and celebrated every small milestone until I finally felt financially secure again. Because of that experience, I never let anyone use my bank cards, no matter how close we were. Cal and I had been together for almost 3 years, and until that day I believed we shared the same values. He was caring and supportive in many ways, but everything changed whenever his mother, Janice, asked for help. She always seemed to have another unexpected expense, and Cal never questioned her stories. I noticed she often borrowed money from relatives, promising to repay them later, but the repayments never seemed to happen. I didn't judge her openly, though I quietly wondered why the emergencies never ended. That morning, Cal told me his mother needed to visit the bank to sort out an issue with her account. I assumed I was only there for company. I had no reason to think it involved me at all. Then Janice smiled warmly, looked straight at me and said, "Honey, can I borrow your card for just one quick payment?" For a moment I couldn't even answer. Janice's request caught me completely off guard. I looked at her, then at my wallet, wondering if I had misunderstood what she meant. "I'm sorry," I said as gently as I could. "I'm just not comfortable using my card for someone else's payment." Her smile faded almost instantly. "Oh, sweetheart, it's only for a minute," she replied with a light laugh. "I'll make sure you're paid back." I shook my head politely. "It's not about the money. I have a personal rule that I don't let anyone use my cards." Before Janice could respond again, Cal stepped closer. His expression had changed in a way I'd never seen before. "Lena," he said quietly, "it's family." "I understand," I answered. But my answer is still no. A few people waiting in the lobby glanced toward us. The conversation wasn't loud, but the tension was becoming impossible to ignore. Janice let out a disappointed sigh and lowered her eyes. "I was only asking for a little help," she murmured. "I didn't think you'd treat me like a stranger." The words made several people nearby look over with curious expressions. I felt every pair of eyes settling on us. "I'm not treating you badly," I explained calmly. "I simply don't share my bank cards with anyone." Cal's patience disappeared. "So you don't trust my family?" he asked. "This isn't about trust," I replied. "It's about a boundary I've always had." His voice grew louder. "You're too selfish to be my wife." The words echoed through the lobby. Conversations stopped and an uncomfortable silence filled the room. My face burned with embarrassment. I wasn't interested in arguing or defending myself in front of strangers. Without saying another word, I turned and walked out of the bank. That evening, I hoped emotions had cooled and that Cal would recognize how hurtful his reaction had been. Instead, he insisted I owed his mother an apology. According to him, the real problem wasn't what had happened. It was that I had embarrassed Janice by refusing her request in public. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the scene at the bank. Cal's words hurt, but another question kept bothering me even more. If his mother truly needed help, why had she asked for my card instead of Cal's? He had been standing beside her the entire time. The more I thought about it, the less sense the situation made. By morning, I still didn't have any answers. I was getting ready for work when my phone rang. The screen showed a name I recognized but had spoken to only a handful of times. Cal's cousin, Avery. After a brief greeting, Avery hesitated before asking, "Can I ask you something? Did Aunt Janice ask you for money yesterday?" I paused for a second. "Not exactly money," I replied. "She wanted me to use my bank card for a payment." There was silence on the other end before Avery let out a quiet sigh. "I was afraid you'd say that." Avery explained that over the past month, Janice had approached several relatives for financial help. She had asked her sister, her brother, 2 cousins, and even an uncle. Each conversation came with a different explanation, and each request sounded urgent enough that people felt guilty saying no. What was the reason this time? Avery asked. I don't really know, I admitted. She just said she needed to make a payment. Avery's voice became more serious. That's the problem. The story keeps changing. According to Avery, one person had been told it was for medical expenses. Another heard it was overdue rent. Someone else believed it was a utility bill, while another relative was asked to help with unexpected car repairs. None of those explanations matched, and no one could figure out where the money was actually going. After the call ended, I sat quietly thinking through everything I'd witnessed over the past few years. Small moments that once seemed unrelated suddenly fit together differently. I wasn't ready to accuse anyone of dishonesty, but I could no longer ignore the pattern. For the first time, I wondered whether the problem wasn't a series of emergencies at all, but something much larger that no one in the family wanted to question. Over the next 2 days, I stopped focusing on how embarrassed I had felt at the bank and started looking at the facts instead. I searched through old text messages between me, Cal, and his mother. I wasn't looking for proof of anything in particular. I simply wanted to understand whether I had overlooked details that didn't seem important at the time. The more I read, the more familiar the pattern became. Janice rarely asked for help early in the week. Most of her requests arrived on Fridays or just before the weekend. Each message sounded urgent, but the explanations were never quite the same. Sometimes she mentioned an unexpected expense. Other times she hinted that a payment couldn't wait. Looking back, the stories felt inconsistent, even if I hadn't noticed it before. I also found a few receipts from occasions when I had covered small meals or picked up groceries because Janice had forgotten her wallet. None of those moments had bothered me individually, but together they painted a different picture. They suggested a habit rather than a coincidence. That afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call from the bank. One of the employees who had been present during the uncomfortable exchange recognized my name and wanted to clarify something. She explained that Janice had tried several other ways to complete the transaction before turning toward me. Without discussing any private banking information, she simply said it appeared my card had not been the first option. After thanking her, I ended the call and sat in silence. If I hadn't been the first person Janice asked, then why had she become so determined to use my card? What payment was important enough to keep searching for another way to complete it? I tried asking Cal again that evening. Instead of answering my questions, he repeated the same sentence he had used before. You don't understand my mother. At first, I accepted those words because I cared about him. But hearing them again felt different. It wasn't an explanation. It was a way of ending every conversation before it began. Little by little, my confidence in our relationship began to fade. The more I searched for clear answers, the more carefully they seemed to be avoided. Avery called me later that week and asked if we could meet somewhere quiet after work. We chose a small coffee shop across town where we were unlikely to run into anyone from Cal's family. From the moment Avery sat down, I could tell this wasn't an easy conversation to have. I haven't told many people this, Avery said, placing a phone on the table. But I think you deserve to know. She opened a folder of photos that had been taken over several months. None of them showed anything dramatic, but together they revealed something unexpected. Janice appeared several times with the same man at different restaurants, outside hotels, and during what looked like weekend outings. His name is Rick Dalton, Avery explained. As far as I know, nobody in the family has officially met him. I looked through the pictures again. Does Cal know about him? I'm not completely sure, Avery replied carefully. Whenever anyone asks, Aunt Janice just says Rick is a private person who doesn't enjoy family gatherings. That explanation might have sounded reasonable on its own, but Avery had noticed something else. Janice seemed to be spending money whenever Rick was around. There were photos outside nice restaurants, receipts Avery had seen for weekend trips, and stories from relatives about gifts Janice had mentioned buying. None of it looked like an emergency, yet she continued asking family members for financial help. As I listened, the pieces I'd been collecting started fitting together in a way I hadn't expected. If relatives had unknowingly contributed money during the past month, where had those funds actually gone? Had everyone been helping without realizing what they were supporting? One question stayed in my mind. Was the payment at the bank connected to Rick as well? That evening, I asked Cal whether he knew anything about the man his mother had been seeing. Instead of showing surprise or asking why I wanted to know, he immediately became defensive. My mom doesn't have to explain every part of her personal life, he said. I didn't say she did, I replied. I'm just trying to understand. He ended the conversation almost as quickly as it had begun. Once again, he defended his mother without addressing a single concern I had raised. His reaction left me with even more questions than before. A few days later, I finally found the answer I had been searching for, though it happened in a way I never expected. I had stopped by a local dealership because a coworker wanted my opinion on an extended warranty before purchasing a vehicle. While we were waiting, an employee recognized me from a previous visit when Cal and I had looked at cars months earlier. During casual conversation, the employee mentioned seeing Janice there recently. At first, I assumed she had been shopping for herself, but one small comment caught my attention. I hope everything worked out after the payment delay, he said before quickly realizing he might have shared more than he intended. I didn't ask for any confidential details and he immediately changed the subject. Still, that brief remark stayed with me. Later that afternoon, Avery called and shared something she had learned from another relative. Janice had recently helped someone close to her purchase a used SUV. The amount mentioned was almost identical to the payment Janice had wanted to make with my card at the bank. My stomach dropped. After asking a few careful questions, I learned the vehicle wasn't even intended for Janice. It was being used by Rick. In that moment, everything became painfully clear. The urgent payment at the bank hadn't been connected to rent, medical bills, or any emergency at all. It appeared to be part of helping Rick receive the vehicle. What hurt even more came later that evening. While speaking with Avery, she mentioned that paperwork connected to the purchase included Cal's signature as a witness. That detail changed everything for me. If Cal had been present during the process, then he already knew what the payment was for. He hadn't been caught off guard at the bank. He hadn't been trying to solve an unexpected problem. He had encouraged me to help without telling me the full situation. I sat quietly for a long time, staring at the wall as the truth settled in. The disappointment wasn't about the money itself. It was realizing the person I planned to marry had chosen silence over honesty. That realization hurt far more than any financial loss ever could have, and for the first time I began questioning whether our future together was built on trust at all. After everything I had learned, I stopped making decisions based on hope and started making them based on facts. I didn't announce what I was doing or try to create a dramatic confrontation. Instead, I quietly began protecting my future. The first call I made was to the florist. I explained that I needed to pause our arrangements until further notice. The next day, I contacted the wedding venue and asked them not to process any additional payments while I reviewed my plans. None of the vendors asked many questions and I appreciated their professionalism. That evening, I reviewed my finances. I transferred my personal savings into an account that only I could access, updated my online banking passwords, and removed any shared payment methods connected to wedding expenses. I also asked the bank about placing additional security measures on my accounts. It wasn't because money had gone missing. I simply wanted to be certain that every financial decision required my approval. A few days later, Cal noticed that wedding preparations had slowed down. "Why are you putting everything on hold?" he asked. "I need some time to think," I answered honestly. He frowned and shook his head. "You're overreacting." I looked at him, hoping this would finally be the moment he acknowledged everything that had happened. Instead, he defended his mother's actions once again. "Mom deserves to be happy," he said. I nodded slowly before asking the only question that mattered. "With my money?" The room became completely quiet. For the first time since the argument at the bank, Cal didn't have an immediate response. He looked away, searching for words that never came. That silence told me more than any explanation could have. He wasn't willing to admit what had happened, but he couldn't deny it either. Something changed inside me during that conversation. I realized I had spent days trying to repair a relationship that only one person seemed interested in saving. Trust had been replaced by uncertainty, and every plan we had made together suddenly felt fragile. From that point forward, I stopped asking whether the wedding could still happen. Instead, I began preparing for the possibility that walking away might be the healthiest decision I could make for myself. A week later, Janice invited the entire family to dinner, saying it was time for everyone to move past the recent misunderstanding. The message sounded cheerful, as though nothing unusual had happened. Cal encouraged me to come, convinced that once everyone was together the tension would disappear. When we arrived, the conversation stayed light at first. People talked about work, upcoming holidays, and everyday life. It almost felt normal. I noticed Cal watching me from across the table, expecting me to apologize for what had happened at the bank. Instead, I waited until dinner was nearly over before placing a small folder on the table. "I think everyone deserves the same information," I said calmly. Inside were copies of text messages requesting financial help, a timeline of when those requests had been made, notes showing how often the explanations had changed, and documents connected to the vehicle purchase that Avery had helped me verify. I wasn't accusing anyone of a crime. I simply wanted everyone to see the pattern for themselves. The room grew quiet as each page was passed around the table. One relative recognized a message asking for help with supposed medical expenses. Another pointed out that they had been told the money was needed for household bills during the very same week. Someone else remembered contributing because they believed there had been an urgent repair. As everyone compared dates, it became clear that the stories didn't match. The payments had come from different people, but they all pointed toward the same period when Rick had entered Janice's life. One family member quietly wiped away tears, realizing they had emptied part of their savings, believing they were helping during a genuine emergency. Another stood up without saying a word and stepped outside to collect their thoughts. Janice insisted there had been misunderstandings and tried to explain each situation separately, but the timeline spoke for itself. Finally, I looked at Cal. "I only have one question," I said. "Did you already know about the vehicle before the bank?" He didn't answer. His silence filled the room. No one argued after that. There was nothing left to debate. The issue was no longer about money. It was about honesty, and once that trust was gone, the atmosphere around the table changed in a way that couldn't easily be repaired. The silence around the table lasted long enough for everyone to understand that nothing more needed to be said. I looked at Cal, hoping for one honest explanation or even a sincere acknowledgement of what had happened. Instead, he stared at the table without responding. I reached up, slipped my engagement ring from my finger and placed it gently beside his dinner plate. There was no argument, no raised voices, and no dramatic farewell. I simply looked at him and said, "You weren't asking me to join your family. You were asking me to finance it." Then I stood, thanked everyone for listening, and walked out. The drive home was emotional, but my decision felt surprisingly clear. Over the following days, I contacted every vendor connected to our wedding and canceled the remaining plans. Some deposits couldn't be refunded, but I accepted that as the cost of moving forward. Peace of mind was worth far more than any reservation fee. Within a few weeks, I rented a modest apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't large or luxurious, but it was mine. As I unpacked my belongings, I realized I felt calmer than I had in months. For the first time since the confrontation at the bank, I wasn't wondering what surprise might come next. Several months passed before Cal began reaching out consistently. He sent messages, left voicemails, and asked if we could meet to talk. His words sounded apologetic, but by then I understood that rebuilding trust requires more than regret. I wished him well, yet I knew returning to the relationship would mean ignoring everything I had learned. Meanwhile, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Janice continued insisting the family had misunderstood her intentions. Most relatives were polite, but things were no longer the same. Questions that had once been ignored were now openly discussed. Not long afterward, Rick quietly drifted out of the picture. The relationship ended, and the vehicle that had caused so much conflict was eventually gone as well. More difficult to replace, however, was the confidence the family had once shared. Broken trust doesn't disappear overnight. As for me, every step away from that chapter felt like a step toward a healthier future. One built on honesty, respect, and choices I could finally make for myself. A year passed and my life looked completely different. The ending I had once feared became the beginning I never expected. Instead of planning a wedding, I was planning a future built on my own decisions. My finances were stronger than they had ever been, and after years of careful budgeting, my credit score reached its highest point. Every small choice I had made along the way had finally added up. Not long afterward, I signed the paperwork for my first home. It wasn't the biggest house on the block, but it represented something far more valuable than appearances. It was a place I had earned through patience, consistency, and the determination to protect the life I had worked so hard to rebuild. Standing inside those empty rooms before moving in, I thought back to the afternoon at the bank. At the time, saying no had felt uncomfortable. I had questioned myself more than once, wondering if I had been too cautious or too stubborn. Looking back, I understood that one decision had protected far more than a bank account. It had protected my future. Over time, I also realized something important about healthy relationships. Genuine love doesn't depend on pressure, guilt, or emotional obligations. Respect grows when both people are free to set boundaries without fear of being judged or punished for them. I no longer felt angry with Cal or his mother. Holding on to resentment would only keep me connected to a chapter one had already left behind. My focus had shifted toward building a peaceful life instead of replaying old disappointments. On the evening I finally moved into my new home, I locked the front door, placed my keys on the table, and set my wallet on the kitchen counter. My eyes rested on the same bank card I had refused to hand over months earlier, and I smiled. It had never been about a piece of plastic or the amount of money attached to it. That card represented the promise I had made to myself after rebuilding my life, that I would never ignore my instincts or surrender my independence again. My greatest victory wasn't exposing Cal or Janice. It was creating a peaceful, secure life built on trust in myself, knowing that the future I had worked so hard to build truly belonged to me. Thanks for watching all the way through. If you enjoyed this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Lena's place. See you in the next one.